Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be unto you and the mercy and his blessings. Uh, I'm going to give an extemporaneous uh, overview of my life in Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam and beyond that, uh, for a few years beyond that, or maybe 10 or 15 years, I don't remember. Uh, but this story basically starts in 1971, and that's over 50 years ago. And many of you, if you were alive then, uh, you may not realize that nobody talked about Muslims 50 years ago in this country. People barely heard of it, didn't know about it. Um, well, that was about it. Nobody was thinking about that. Uh, so I didn't know anything about it. But what happened in August 1971, for some reason, Augusts uh, are weird months for me. And that particular August, a friend of mine, good friend of mine who had been out of town, he was an excellent tenor saxophone player and bassoon player. He and I had improvised together. I was much influenced by John Coltrane. Um, not so much by McCoy Tyner, his pianist. I loved his piano playing, but that wasn't what I was into. John Coltrane, his later works, the way out. Um, and so this fellow and I did improvisations together and everything, and he was out of town, and I was living in Yellow Springs, Ohio, which I believe was his hometown. I was teaching at Antioch College, and I don't think he was a student at the college, but a lot of people hung out at Antioch. It was that kind of place. And he showed up with his head shaved and wearing a black suit. I don't remember if he had a tie, but he had joined the Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam. And there's a reason I keep saying Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam. I'll come back to that. But he had joined, and it was a shock. Um, so that was the beginning. He and another fellow from a nearby city, probably from Dayton, which was about 30 miles away, which in that part of the country, 30 miles is nearby, or maybe even from Cincinnati, which was, I don't know, 70, 80 miles south. Uh, but they came just about every week or 2 weeks. They just came. For 2 years, they came. They fishing was the word that they used unashamedly, because a fish sees something and thinks it's going to have dinner, and the fish becomes dinner. But yeah, they were fishing. That's what they called it in Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam. And so they worked on me for 2 years. Now they knew that I was in the gay life. They knew that. So they were fishing me in. And so one of the things that they told me was Elijah Muhammad had said that when the devil, you remember, the white man is the devil. That's what Elijah Muhammad was teaching. Part of a whole bunch of stuff that he taught, right? The white man is the devil. That wasn't hard to believe. Still isn't, when I would tell my dad, may Allah bless him, admit him to paradise. Dad, if I said Elijah Muhammad says the white man is the devil, and Dad would say, no, the devil is taking notes. So no, that's not so ridiculous, but especially not now. My goodness, right now. But at any rate, they said that Elijah Muhammad had said, and he said many things that were crazy, many things that were true, many things that were helpful, many things that were wise. Um, and this thing he said was dependent upon the devil being the white man being the devil, the whole theology about that, okay? Because that's not a political statement, it's a theological statement. Of the white man is the devil in the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. Um, he said that when the devil is destroyed, and Elijah Muhammad was teaching that the devil is going to be destroyed, uh, the whole country is going to be destroyed. The mothership is going to come, and bombing planes are going to destroy all of the cities and everything, and all of Elijah Muhammad's followers are going to escape to Canada and Mexico, and America is going to be set on fire and burned for over 300 years. That's what he taught. So he said that when the devil is destroyed, all of these evil conditions will go away. And at the time, even though I had gone into the gay life very reluctantly after I had spent 8 years trying to not be homosexual. And I'm embarrassed because I say, well, what would I do? What do you do to not be homosexual? So anyway, but he said, he said that when the devil is destroyed, these evil conditions will go away. And I thought it was an evil condition. I just didn't know what else to do. Um, so that was an enticement, right? And so eventually, when I finally did join Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam, um, it was with that understanding that, the devil was going to be destroyed and these evil conditions will go away. Well, boy, that was a problem because Elijah Muhammad died. And all the teachings and everything basically went into the grave with him. And so I had walked away from the gay life, and there I was in this Nation of Islam. Now I had thrown myself into it when I finally decided, after 3 years of them, 2 years of them working on me, and another year of thinking about it. I finally joined, and then less than a year after I joined, Elijah Muhammad died. His son became the leader, and his son uh, basically just told us that what Elijah Muhammad had been teaching us was wrong. So there I was, up the creek, as they say, without a paddle. I had given up my gay life, walked away from my academic career. Antioch College had told me that they were going to give me tenure. Do you know what tenure is? Technically, tenure means you can't be fired, a lifelong appointment, right? Uh, and I had only been there for 3 years. A lot of people they'll teach for 7 years someplace, and they're wondering, am I going to get tenure? I mean, they're running after it, like boy. Uh, but at any rate, I wasn't even thinking about it. They said, oh, they're thinking of giving me tenure, and I walked away from that. Just walked away. I didn't even bother to resign. I just left. Really stupid, but that's what I did. Um, well, I know the life I was living at Antioch, and Antioch just seemed to be fine with it, right? I was having sex with students and male and female. Um, Actually, I only had sex with one female student, but still, I was 25, she was 18. Um, just barely legal. You know what I mean? But it wasn't all that interesting to me. But I was off the hook. I was just off the hook, and they said they were going to give me tenure, and so the voice in my head said, "Oh yeah, right, the white man is the devil. I'm crazy, and they're going to give me tenure." So anyway, I joined the Nation of Islam, and then Elijah Muhammad died. Anyway, but in those 2 years before that, I was working on my PhD from Harvard University. And I basically, part of the reason it took 2 or 3 years was because I decided, fortunately, I'm glad I did that I would get the PhD and then make my final decision. So, I spent 2 years working on my thesis, my PhD thesis, while I was at Antioch College, and turned that in and was awarded the PhD. And then I decided to go to leave and go. Uh, I got a job at Howard University. And that was interesting because I just walked into the office, right? I didn't send them an application or make an inquiry or anything. I just walked into the chairman's office, and he said they didn't have any openings. So I got up to walk out, and he said, well, let me see some of your work. So I played a composition for him, a little piano piece about, a minute and a half long. I think it's about that long, um, that I had written when I was 15 years old. 15, I was in the hospital with tuberculosis with 15, and I wrote this composition. And that composition got me into the graduate seminar at Harvard University when I was 16. I was a Harvard National Scholar, one of the top 50 students admitted to Harvard that year. I was 16 years old, and I walked into a professor's office and played that piece for him, and he admitted me to the graduate seminar in composition. Um, So anyway, I played that piece for the chairman of the music department at Howard University, and he went, and even though they didn't have any openings, he arranged for me to go to Howard as a visiting lecturer. So I got a job at Howard, even though they didn't have any openings, based on that work, that composition. So I was at Howard, and unfortunately, Mark Fax, that was his name, one of the most decent people I've ever met, but he got sick and died during the year. And the rest of the department didn't know what to do with me. Howard University, at least the music department, is very ingrown, uh, and I was an outsider. But I had decided to join the Nation of Islam anyway. So that contract ended at the end of the year. I went to work uh, for the Shabazz restaurant in Washington D.C. as a steam table server. I was not looking for anything grandiose, some position, some whatchamacallit, I wanted to help Elijah Muhammad build a nation for our people. And so that was what was available, to work as a steam table server at the Shabazz restaurant. I worked long hours, sometimes 70 hours a week or more, and got little pay and sometimes no pay. I was dedicated. I was dedicated. Um, but at any rate, I'll leave it at that, except one thing I want to say. I'm from New York City, and while I was in New York in 1973, I visited Temple Number 7 in Manhattan, and Farrakhan was the minister there. And I walked in. I don't remember being introduced by anybody. I just walked in off the street, so to speak. And Farrakhan, gave his talk. And then at the end of the talk, there's this traditional thing they do where they introduce distinguished visitors, distinguished guests. And I had no idea if they had any idea who I was. But I was asked to stand up. And while I'm standing in front of a couple of hundred people that I've never seen before in my life, Farrakhan starts chuckling. There's a very self-satisfied sort of chuckle that Farrakhan has, and other people have, I think they picked it up from him. I'm standing there, no explanation as to why he's chuckling. I'm standing there. I was furious, really. If I had been in New York, I would have never joined Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam. But as it so happened, I moved to Washington, D.C. from Ohio, and Dr. Shabazz, Abdul Alim, well, his name was Lonnie Shabazz at the time, and he was a man with a PhD in mathematics from Cornell University. He had been a consultant for the Census Bureau and for NASA. And it should have been, like a shock, except people are excited about athletes. So when Muhammad Ali joined the organization, it was a big deal. But, he was a man who was a mathematician, PhD from Cornell, all of this. He joined the Nation of Islam. And of course, nobody's ever heard of him because, after all, who cares about mathematicians? But he was the minister. And he gave a talk, and he could get, he wasn't an orator like Farrakhan, but he could get carried away, his eyes light up. And, he's a really dark, slim man from Alabama. And, he could get up there and he talked about courage, and that struck a bell with me. And so I finally decided that I was going to join. And so I joined in Washington, D.C. The minister was a PhD from Cornell, and the assistant minister was an educated man, and they were, and it was, we were happy Muslims in Washington, D.C. They said we had bean pie smiles. I don't know if you've ever had a bean pie from the Nation of Islam, but oh my goodness, I haven't had one in years, but they're really good. And we sold bean pies up and down the street and everything, along with the paper. And so we were friendly Muslims. We had bean pie smiles. So that was Washington, D.C. when I joined in March of 1974. So more on that later. So that's the beginning of my overview of my time, the tales from the crypt. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.